And hello to all the Weather and Ag in Focus listeners today. Welcome to this drizzly Thursday afternoon. And maybe it's not raining where you are. I do see some sunshine happening down in southern and central South Dakota. Folks have been sending in some of those reports. Hey, by the way, if you are looking for a place to send how much rainfall you've gotten, please let us know here at the studio. We'd like to have that information. Frankly, here at my house, we've gotten probably just over a third of an inch again overnight and today. So more moisture has indeed been on the way. In fact, for today's weather, we are looking at rainy conditions for the first half. There might be some clearing out there. I'll have to check on a break and let you know. And temperatures in the low 60s, winds blowing about 10 to 25 miles an hour. As we look ahead into the weekend, we will probably see some widespread steady rain from today into Minnesota, but a warm up's coming. Windy weekend ahead, folks, so keep those hats on tight. Saturday could be in the 60s and 70s and possibly even a bit warmer in some spots. Sunday also looks to be even warmer. So spring is arriving. Here it is on May 1st. So many good things. We think about May and we definitely think that spring has sprung. We've left our April showers. Hopefully we start to see May flowers. In fact, last weekend I saw some daffodils in my yard trying to make an appearance. So back to those weather rain totals. If you have particularly one of our WDAY rain gauges that you've been using or any other gauge, let us know what rain totals are for you. You can send them to me, ag@flagfamily.com. You can call in on the JLA Insurance phone line, 701-293-9000. And thank you for watching on our Facebook and YouTube live feeds. You'll see us there. WDAY, Weather and Ag in Focus, and you can also find us on Acres TV. We are the only weather and news related ag show on Acres TV. This is a platform that is completely focused on agriculture, and we get the pleasure of being a part of it. Thank you to Progressive Ag Risk Management Specialists for bringing us the weather report for today. All right, a lot of things going on as we turn the calendar into May. First and foremost, it's beef month. So let's get ready to celebrate. Maybe you've got some hamburger thawing to make barbecues later tonight. Perhaps you're thinking about some steaks this weekend as the temperature warms up and you want to dust off the grill if you haven't already. It is time to bring those things out. Don't forget about those overthought or under-considered cuts of meat as well, because folks have really started to get into using flank steak, especially if you're smoking it. Of course, there's going to be briskets for the summer for shredded beef sandwiches. It is sandwich season, and beef is a great player in that. And think about something unusual, maybe. In fact, as of late, I've noticed a lot more people are using beef tongue. Whether they're smoking it or however they're preparing it, this seems to be what I would have considered an unused meat that's probably more popular in Spanish and Mexican dishes, but folks are starting to see more use of it here. And why not? Give it a try. You never know if you're going to find something that you really like. May also brings us a mental health month, and with an emphasis on our farmers and ranchers, our folks in agribusiness, the folks that are behind the teller's station at the bank, your equipment salesmen and mechanics, those who deliver the fuel for the tractors. All of those people should be considered as well. They're a part of agriculture, and some folks, as a Twitter follower told me the other day, some folks might be out walking the dark dog, meaning those dark thoughts get to their heads. This is a month for us to focus on each other. I know we're busy. We're in the field. We're doing a lot of things. But if given the chance whatsoever, check on each other. Make sure we're doing okay. And throughout the month, I'll be happy to provide resources and places that you can go when indeed help is wanted and needed. Well, as a rainy day that it is, gives you the opportunity to maybe catch up. I did talk to some farmers Monday afternoon down in Amenia. They made mention that, well, we got started. We have a few acres in. We might have broke some things or found the items on our planter that were broke. So it's been fix or repair in the shops. And if you're doing that, maybe you also want to do a little shopping, something better than just having to go buy parts. And over on the big deals page for us here at the radio group, you can go to the flag bigdealsmedia.net and you can check out the auction. Currently only have about 4 hours left on a set of golf clubs. Now, I'm not that good at golf. I'll be honest. I've had the same set of golf clubs since 1997 and they haven't improved, and frankly, neither has my game. But this is a retail value $2,000 set of golf clubs. The current bid's $500. The description of them is a Mizuno Golf, Mizuno. For those who are golfers, you probably know what this is. It's a Pro T30 wedge set, a XPX 925 forged. All those things mean they're good golf clubs to me. Looks like a set of three. You should probably check these out. Can you tell I don't do sports as well as I don't do weather? I mean, come on, you guys. There's only so many things I'm good at. And obviously, sports is not one of them. My athleticism has been described as cow on ice, and they were not wrong in that description. All right, other things that are going on. Hey, you know what? If you're in the shop, if you're moving seed around and getting ready, perhaps you're even in your own warehouse because you've got seed that's going out the door to your customers. Seed researchers are urging farmers to take another look at the fine print on your seed tags. For those who might not know that, there are tags on every bag of seed or every box of seed, bulk bags, etc., that gives descriptive information about what's contained inside the packaging. Well, last year's dry harvest conditions could have impacted germination testing. So most of the time when you harvest soybean seed, let's say 14, 15% moisture, you handle it gently. Some folks may even take it to the dryer as seed beans dry down slightly so it's in really good shape for the next growing season. However, there were not a lot of soybeans harvested in that optimal range, especially as we go further east into areas of Wisconsin, Iowa, etc. Many of our seed beans are raised up here. They might be in a little bit better shape, but if you are looking at a longer day variety or some sort of change, you've got to consider your germination. So soybeans included in seed plots were harvested with moisture levels that were even below 8%. And that can cause the seed coat to crack during your harvest when you're handling it, increasing the risk for disease, especially poor germination. And while we're under these cooler, wetter weather conditions that you and I are seeing right now. So go look at those pro boxes, look for that percent of germ on there. And if there's anything under 85% germination, think about how you're going to increase your seeding rates about 10%. That helps you offset issues of early season germination and emergence. There's already a few specific varieties that are not company specific, but they have less than a 90% germ rating because of the area where they were harvested. So keep an eye on those germinations. Don't forget to take a little look at those tags if you have a chance and you're out in the shop. You know, one of the stories we had yesterday, and I did not get a chance to give it nearly enough time. Again, thank you to the Beulah High School for hosting me. We were with the Beulah FFA chapter and 5 of their students who participate in an ag communications class and contest, and they helped us do the show yesterday. But one of those conversations we need to have is about drones. And I've had more and more farmers who are picking up drones this year. They're going to use them for some potential spraying, even getting like the heat sensors on them so you can tell, all right, maybe I'm going to use that during hunting season. If I shot a doe and I can't find it, maybe I want to use that in case of a snowstorm. Those types of things, you need to find somebody. And so when you're thinking about the agricultural drones for pesticide work, there's a few things you got to keep in mind. You have to have your licensing in the state in which you operate, whether it's your private applicators or your commercial applicators license, okay? Get those things out of the way first. Many of you have that if you're already doing your own applications in the field. Then you need to take your exam and stay certified for what's called the CNC. And again, that's making sure you have the right licensing to go along with pesticide applications. Register your drone, and it's got to be registered with the FAA. Just buying a drone doesn't mean that you can launch that thing and get it up in the air. There's plenty of other items you've got to do. So like in Minnesota, you've got to register with the Minnesota DOT. That's important. Then there's necessary FAA certifications that you need to follow up with. And those certifications would include, hold on, I gotta turn the page. Part 107, that's required for commercial drone pilots operating drones under 55 pounds, or Part 137 if you're going to be using one for agricultural pesticide applications. Then talk to your insurance agent. You need to make sure that you are covered insurance wise and for business insurance, particularly if you're scouting other people's fields, etc. There are business liabilities that can come with drones and when you're flying them. So make sure that you're up to speed on everything that needs to be done. Again, I try to be very proactive and cautious. Don't just run out and start flying it. Make sure we have all the things in place that we need. All right. Again, don't forget those rain totals, everybody. I'm looking forward to seeing them show up as the day goes on. And also, I'm looking forward to our discussion today with our guest, and that's Andrew Green. He is the wheat breeder at North Dakota State University. Some of you have just said, what's a wheat breeder? What do you think Andrew does? Well, the good news is he's going to fill us in. We're going to have that discussion. A lot of it stems from the fact that we're raising wheat. Talk with Andrew because I had listener questions that came in talking about specific things regarding wheat. But we also just need the background and the history because this area really has been built on wheat production. If we go back to the days of the bonanza farms that started in the late 1800s, wheat was their primary crop. That's the reason large farms came to the region. Many towns exist today because of the bonanza farms that began in the area. If you're ever curious about the background and history, there's a fabulous book written by, I believe he was a Concordia College professor, and his name was Hiram Draki, and he does a fantastic job of outlining so many of the things that happened during the days of the bonanza, how people got here, and what continued to build the history of the region agriculturally. So it's going to be a great discussion with Andrew today. I'm looking forward to it. First, we need to get to the markets from the American Ag Network, and after that, we'll continue our conversation with our guest. Welcome back to Weather and Ag in Focus. Excited to have you joining us today. I hope where you're at, the sun's starting to peek out, the rain has moved past, and hopefully the wind hasn't even picked up too tremendously yet. You know, as you're getting ready for the field work, you've been sending a lot of vital documents. And as we've learned from Chris Sherman, our cybersecurity superhero, he has pointed out that he can help you over there at Tech Support Farm, making sure that you are keeping your information safe. Do you have the right email addresses, not just a random AOL or Gmail email address that people can hack and take snippets of personal information? Give Chris a call. He is our regional expert when it comes to agribusinesses, farms, and cybersecurity. And that's at techsupportfarm.com. I'm joined today by Andrew Green. And Andrew, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Fabulous. I look forward to the day that you and I get to meet in person. We haven't done that yet, and it's going to be wonderful when we do.
I know this is one step closer than a regular telephone call, but we're working our way up to it slowly, aren't we?
Absolutely. Okay. So there's folks that reached out to me and said, what's a wheat breeder do for the state of North Dakota? So fill us in on some background, Andrew.
Yeah, it's actually a question that I get a lot of quizzical looks at. What exactly is it that you do? And in a nutshell, my job is to help develop varieties of wheat for farmers in our state and adjacent areas. But our primary focus is North Dakota, and we do that through very applied research. We have um, plots, small plots all over the state. We have miniature planters, we have miniature combines, and our goal is to test in as many environments as possible and develop for higher yield, high quality, high protein, good disease resistance, and any other new problems that come along.
Every year we have this discussion when it comes to wheat in North Dakota, and folks say protein. And I just heard you mention that higher protein. Can you help us with a little bit of background as to why does protein matter so much in wheat and where does it matter?
Yeah, so we measure grain protein at the point of sale for our wheat. And the reason is because when our export customers, and half of our wheat in North Dakota is exported to the international market. So that's, I guess, an important point there.
Mhm.
The half that's kept domestically is also, there's a high standard for that, but that protein is what translates into bread making quality. And hard red spring wheat has a reputation of superior milling and baking quality for high quality breads, frozen doughs. And so, in order for us to maintain that demand in the export markets, uh, protein is important. So, we've got to find in our program things that have good grain yield as well as high protein.
Let's back up just a moment and maybe a little bit of a history lesson for those who are listening, because I'm often asked as well, with a, as you said, rather quizzical look, what do you mean there's more than one type of wheat? And there are quite a variation in the classes of wheat that are raised across the US, and then specifically what we will raise in North Dakota. Do you want to touch on those at all for us?
Sure. So, across the US, we've got one major division that most folks are probably familiar with is winter versus spring types. And then in the eastern part of the United States, primarily you're growing mostly soft wheats, which go for cookies and crackers and cake flour, things like that, lower protein, where you don't necessarily want the expansion from that uh, protein, that gluten network that we want in our bread wheats here. So then if you keep kind of moving west, you've got the winter wheat states in the central and southern plains, and then us here in the spring wheat region are all growing hard red wheats primarily. There are hard white wheats grown also. And then the Pacific Northwest, you've kind of actually got all possible combinations. They have got hard wheats for bread, soft wheats for noodles, for other types of cake and cookie flours, in red and white winter and spring combinations. So depending on where you are in the country, you're breeding for different types of end use, and that's a major part of how the program is going to be set up.
So here in North Dakota, for your research, are you primarily focusing on spring wheat? hard red spring wheat, by the way. But are you also including hard red winter wheat and durum?
No, so at North Dakota State, we actually have a winter wheat breeder, Dr. Murray, and we also have a durum wheat program led by Dr. Elias. And those programs have been, um, the durum program's been around for a long time. The winter wheat program was around, and then it was off for a little while, and now it's been going for 10 to 12 years again. So they focus on those, and our primary focus in my program is hard red spring wheat as well as hard white spring wheat.
Okay. And hard white is a little bit newer to our region because and I'm only going to be able to use my experience here in the last 25, 30 years. I always talk about hard red winter wheat, but do you see an uptick in a hard white wheat that people are interested in talking about?
So the demand for hard white spring wheat is probably always been high. It's you could say that it's increasing too. The challenge has been that those wheats are often difficult to grow, particularly in places where you have issues with pre-harvest sprouting. There's
Hmm.
a tight association between the white kernel color and the tendency to sprout in the field. And so we have to work to minimize that. And then we also have to work to sort of mitigate that risk by where we grow those varieties. So those in North Dakota will be primarily adapted to the western third of the state.
Okay. The questions are coming in. I've got getting more and more things. But one of the questions that I need to ask you on behalf of a listener is there's always been the story that there are 100-year plots at NDSU that help us hold our land grant university status. Can you lend any credibility to that or give us a little backstory on it?
So what we're probably referring to there is the continuous wheat plot on campus, which was
Hmm.
established in, I probably could have said in year if I hadn't been asked, but I believe it was before North Dakota was a state even, maybe
I think you're right.
1888,
Yeah.
1888 maybe is the year that kind of sounds right. That's been planted to wheat every year since that point, and it was originally established for the studying of um, primarily root and soil-borne diseases. So your root rots, your soil-borne uh, factors, which are more of a concern when it's continuous wheat production. So those would have been major disease restraints at that time. When it was wheat on wheat on wheat was the rotation, and
Hmm.
so over time, that's become a little less relevant, but there's still a lot of questions that can be answered by looking at a piece of land that has had wheat grown to it every year for that entire time. So it's something very unique for sure.
Well, there's a lot of unique things that happen in North Dakota, and one of them is we have our very own wheat breeder, and that's Dr. Andrew Green. He's joining me today to talk all things wheat, especially because we're going to be growing it ourselves. We're going to return after our bottom of the hour news with more questions, and if you have any, again, don't forget to call in the JLA Insurance phone line 701-293-9000. We'll be right back. All right, folks, I got to tell you that ad for the big deals going out and looking at those Mizuno golf clubs is far better than I would have done because, frankly, I'm just not that good at golf. But what I am good at, what I like doing, I like raising wheat. And that's a big topic of our conversation today with Dr. Andrew Green from NDSU. He's the NDSU Wheat breeder. And also, thanks to those who are one of those would be Progressive Ag. They are your risk management specialists, and there's plenty of risk as we've talked to commodity traders over the winter months as we watch these commodity markets take some rapid swings, and one certainly is pinned downward. Have a discussion with the folks over at Progressive Ag to see how they can help you best do your marketing. And I continually read the tariffs are coming, the tariffs are coming. So maybe you need to think about trading vehicles, looking for that reliable vehicle to send someone off to college this fall. Check out Vision Ford. Maybe you're making a parts run down there anyway. You need to stop by and pick up whether it's parts, fill a diesel fuel tank, whatever the case might be. If you're in the Wapaton area, swing into Vision Ford and have a look at what's on their lot. So, Dr. Green, one of the questions I wanted to ask today is, all right, so why a wheat breeder? How did you decide that this is the area of study you couldn't wait to get into? I mean, I grew up in North Dakota as a kid raising wheat, so I feel like it's just part of my citizenship here.
Yeah, and it's not a part of mine. It's kind of a funny story. So I was an undergraduate student at a small school in Missouri called Truman State, and I worked for a corn breeder there. And I was on my third year working for him, and I said I want to do something different. And I got a recommendation to call up the folks at Montana State University, where I spoke with their wheat breeder, Dr. Luther Talbert, who has since retired. And I said, "Are you looking for summer help?" He said, "Yeah, you can come out here, but we can't pay you very much." And I said, "Okay, that's fine." And I went out. I spent most of my paycheck on gas and fly fishing, and I learned about wheat. And I said, "This is pretty cool." And from there, he hooked me up with my master's advisor program. Where I went to school in Virginia at Virginia Tech. Came back a little bit closer to home for my further graduate work at Kansas State, and it's kind of been all on a good track since then. So like 17 years ago or 18 years ago, I had never even touched a wheat plant, and now it's all I think about all day. So
Well, I'm glad you do. Again, this is a
yeah,
big part of our economy in North Dakota. Wheat has truly built what we do here agriculturally in so many ways. And frankly, I'm a bit of a no carb left behind fan, so I'm all for bread. Thanks for everything you do for my diet. Appreciate it. So, additional questions for you, Dr. Green. All right, can wheat be grown anywhere? We know that we do a great job of it here in this region from northwestern Minnesota through North Dakota into Montana, and probably even those southern provinces in Canada. So, why? What's best about our conditions and makes it so favorable for our wheat?
that's a good question. We have really desirable growing temperatures. Wheat is a cool season grass, and we have good moisture, even in the parts of our state which are dry. We have good growing moisture. We have nice temperatures that are very conducive to producing those high yields. And wheat's a pretty tough crop. It's pretty resilient. So we do grow wheat in every county in North Dakota. And at one point or another, I would venture to guess that most of the lower 48 states have had wheat cultivated in them to some extent or another. And it's probably on a small acreage and still the majority of the states in the US, primarily because it is pretty resilient. But here in North Dakota, we've got good growing season, we've got good soil. There are a lot of things going for us, but I would say that our temperatures and overall moisture and it can roll with the punches if it gets hot and dry, which is why a lot of times it'll even succeed, in a really dry year.
So this is a listener question I really would like your help in answering. And there was an article recently that talked about genetically engineered wheat. And this discussion really focused on it being more of a drought tolerant genetic engineering. That's what the goal is of this particular experimentation, et cetera. And currently, I was asked, is there any genetically modified wheat in the US? My answer to that is there really isn't, but I might be wrong. So, can you just Explain what you know. Help us understand what's going on in that world right now.
Yeah, and it's a little bit, it's not complicated. It's very convoluted, so I'll do my best. Because the regulations, they change like the weather at times, and keeping up with this stuff can be a little bit challenging. So to address the question first, the drought trait, probably what we're referring to there is what's known as HB4, which is a
Hmm.
transgenic drought tolerant wheat variety that was originally developed in Argentina and is now being cultivated commercially in Argentina, Brazil, and it's been approved for cultivation in a few other places. Um, there are experiments which are beginning to transfer that gene into winter wheats in the United States if for the central and southern plains. Um, those experiments are just beginning now. So
Hmm.
I was in a meeting in February, and I know the organization that is working to bring this in. And the question was asked, how soon till we get a variety? And his response, he held out his hands and he said, I could hold all of the seed that's present in the U.S. in American germplasm in both hands and have some room left over. So what that means is that there's a lot of testing, field trials, and then seed increase. We're probably 4 to 5 years away at the very earliest from having transgenic wheat from to market, in a commercial variety. So there is no transgenic wheat currently grown in the U.S. Gene editing is kind of a whole different ball of wax, and we can talk about that if we're
Sure.
interested. But you know, when we say GMO, that's kind of a tricky term because if someone asks me about a GMO anything, what I usually have to do, or what I like to do, is to ask them what they mean by that. And when
Hmm.
I'm use the word transgenic, that's really what I'm the term GMO is kind of reserved for transgenes. And what that is just a gene from another species that's been inserted into that crop plant for, insect resistance, herbicide tolerance. Think about your BT corn, Roundup Ready. These are all genes that have been taken from other species and placed into the soybean, the corn, the cotton. Um, so gene editing is a little bit different. That's a little more precise in some ways, and it doesn't involve the
Hmm.
introduction of DNA from another species. The regulations for that are a little bit confusing right now, so they made that easier to access for a lot of crops back in 2020. A district court in California actually overturned a lot of those rulings just this past December, which kind of reverted us back to pre 2020 levels. Um, it would be difficult to get a permit for gene edited wheat right now, but it would be possible. So wheat's kind of always been on the sidelines of a lot of the biotechnology talk. When a lot of these exemptions were made for your row crops, we sort of got left out of that conversation. And I was a part of a group through the National Wheat Improvement Committee where we were trying to advocate for more tolerance for this technology in wheat. And it was very receptive. The USDA APHIS folks were very encouraged by the science we were able to help bring to them to be able to justify introducing these things. And unfortunately, with the courts and the injunctions and now some of the staff reductions at APHIS, I think that time will come, but it just might be a little while.
Well, for a topic that has a lot of twists and turns to it, you might say, you went through it very well. So thank you. I really appreciate your knowledge and
Sure.
help in that. And I do want to reiterate, most folks, when they hear something that's genetically modified, genetically engineered, whether we're talking about gene editing, they automatically assume that it has to do with herbicide tolerance. And in this case, it does not. That really isn't the concern at all.
Yeah. So you can have a lot of different think traits you could focus on. If there were no rules for transgenic wheat or gene edited wheat, think about all the problems we have in production, fusarium head blight resistance, these protein levels that trade off with yield. There are genes that you could possibly use to help alleviate some of those concerns, you might be able to fix pre-harvest sprouting for good. There's a lot of power. Um, I think we'll get there. The consumer acceptance, I think, is slowly coming along. The science is there. The government regulation is, comes and goes, but in general, I think we're on a good path with wheat. And there's also a lot of benefits to being one of the crops that doesn't necessarily rely on transgenic technology too, because you've got a good segment of the market that isn't necessarily interested in transgenic wheat, or there are a lot of health avenues and smaller market opportunities that farmers might have in the future, um, to be able to take their grain in places where maybe those transgenes aren't desirable. So it's good to
Mhm.
have a little bit of flexibility.
So today, May 1st, historically, we have a lot of our small grain already planted, but not everybody's is. Are you looking for farm cooperators where you could have wheat out on the farm for research? And what does some of your research look like for 2025?
Well, we're always looking for cooperators. We've got a really good set now, and our program maintains experiments at about 10 different locations across the state. Some of that is in cooperation with the Research Extension Center network through NDSU, and about half of those are on farm, privately sponsored trials from farmers, where we just get a corner of a quarter and we say, we're going to plant this area here. If you can hang a boom over and spray it at the same time, fertilize it just like you do your wheat. So when we do those locations, it takes a really good cooperator to be patient with us, because everything happens really slowly with research. We used to laugh that
Mhm.
when we were out cutting yield plots, with our little small combines, people would say like, "Oh, how many acres can you do in a day with one of those?" And it's like, "Oh, maybe like one and a half if it's really good." So it takes a lot of patience and a lot of understanding of what we're trying to do, but we've got a really good set right now. So what's going on in 2025? We have some things that are kind of always going on, a first year yield trial, a second year yield trial. Things just kind of move through the sequences, and in each year there are fewer individuals and they get tested at more locations. And our goal
Mhm.
there is just to try to identify the next variety. We've got some work. Um, we're always working on the rusts. We're always working on Fusarium head blight. We've got a project active in wheat stem sawfly resistance in the West.
Mm,
We've got some specialty quality things that we're looking at trying to introduce that might be sort of a um, smaller market, higher contract basis, better margins, hopefully, for producers in the
right.
future on some of these kind of specialty things. And so it's a process. Developing a variety takes anywhere between 6 to 10 years from the first cross to when that variety could be planted on the farm. And so every year is kind of just a lot of the same thing over and over again, and hoping that we can weed things out and some new kind of projects sprinkled in as we find new opportunities.
There's never a dull moment, not particularly when it comes to wheat research in North Dakota, because in conversations I've had with multiple agronomists, they feel like there have been a few more planted acres of wheat so far this year, which wonderful. Glad to see that boost in our acreage because we have been on the downward
Yeah,
trend. So thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Green. I really appreciate it. And thanks for answering all those questions. One last one before you go, though, is
sure.
coming into me. And what disease is our greatest concern? You talked earlier about how 100 years ago, 150 years ago, we were really concerned about root rot, wheat on wheat. We don't have a wheat on wheat rotation very often anymore. But what are the greatest concerns that farmers have today when it comes to disease pressure?
Our number one disease is still Fusarium head blight. We do a lot of work on FHB resistance, and we do a lot of work incorporating appropriate levels of resistance that work when managed well with fungicide. So recognizing that
Okay.
immunity is not necessarily a goal, but we're trying to mimic what's going on the farm. Bacterial leaf streak is a huge problem. This is a disease for which there is no chemical response. There is no input aside from a resistant variety. So that's something we're working really hard on. The rusts are kind of a maintenance thing for us. We have good resistance, but a disease like stem rust can be so devastating to our area, and we've seen an increase in stem rust in the past couple of years that if you take your eye off the ball even for a year, you can really regret it. And so we have a lot of things that we kind of just monitor. But in terms of innovative approaches, things that we really need to push hard on, Fusarium head blight, bacterial leaf streak, and I would probably also add the wheat stem sawfly.
Okay, yeah, I've had a lot of discussion about the wheat stem sawfly, and it just doesn't necessarily have the it certainly has the attention, but it doesn't have the resources necessarily, right? Most folks are like, oh, spray an insecticide. It doesn't work that way. Timing is very different for that particular pest. So,
Yeah,
Dr. Green,
and
thank you
it
again.
may not be
Really
a.
appreciate your
Oh yeah,
time.
thank you very much. And if anybody has any other questions, just get a hold of me. I'm happy to answer.
Oh, don't worry. I'll hand out your contact information for you. It'll be great. So,
Great, no problem.
all right. Thanks, folks. Hold tight. I got to recap the weather. I got a few more headlines for us before we wrap up today. So, be right back. All right, the weatherman's not here, so I guess it's my day to do the weather. And some of you snicker because you're like, oh, bad, she's gonna mess this one up. She might know the difference between gluten and a GMO, but she's not really good with the weather. Anyway, it's gonna be a little bit rainy today. Skies are gonna clear up. In fact, I heard a last little rain shower go by while I've been on air. And after that, temperatures in the low 60s, winds blowing north 15 to 25. We're anticipating a windy weekend, but also a bit of a warm up. So let's get through today. Hope for some sunshine throughout the weekend, and that wind isn't too bad to help us dry out some of those field conditions out there. Now, don't forget, I'm always excited to find students who can participate in the show, and I'm looking for weather and ag intern. That is a person who can join me for a show. I've got some slots open coming up over the summer months, and would love to have that student come in, answer questions about headlines like I do, interview guests, be a part of all the things that go on in the background, and so much more. So, if you have a student who's interested, or you yourself are 15 years old to a sophomore in college, you just drop me a message, ag@flagfamily.com, and I will send you that application. With this sunshiny weather, we know that that's going to bring out the insects. Nobody wants to see that less than a beef or dairy animal. You know, and horses as well. No animal really loves to see the flies emerge because those pests can cause so much stress on our animals, and it can lower their gain of rate, or their rate of gain when they're trying to put pounds on, or even their milk production, right down to being a dairy animal, or even trying to help out their calves. How are we going to prevent these types of situations? Well, one of the things you can do is, if any of you remember getting those little pour on tick medicine that you could use on your dogs, you can do a similar pour on method with cows, certainly just a bigger option. So with cattle, you can do the pour-on method with them, and there are a number of active ingredients available to do that. There's feed additives that can be given to the animal. All you got to do is blend it in with their ration when they're eating out of a feed bunk. And one of the most natural ones that I heard about was even including garlic. Well, if garlic keeps the flies away, does it also slightly flavor my beef? Because I'd be okay with a flavor of garlic in my ribeye. I was going to do that anyway, so it's just cutting out a little step for me. But there's other feed additives that can be used as well that also prevent larvae from passing through the animal, and then also just, again, emerging more flies and pests out there. There are insecticide tags. You can put an ear tag on that carries the insecticide to keep the flies off. And then also there are dust bags or oilers. If you ever drive by a pasture and you see two posts with a bag hanging between it, looks like a feed bag, animals can walk underneath that.